Hello and welcome back to the Second and Short College Football Show. Week 6 of college football is now underway, just about to the halfway point of the college football season. We've certainly got a lot of things to cover today, but before we get into anything, make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications here on YouTube. Make sure you like the video, and we'll give you something to comment about as we get through the episode. As well as that, make sure you follow us on Instagram to stay up to date with everything we've got going on. Make sure you're listening to the podcast Mondays and Fridays, either here on YouTube or on any platform where you get your podcasts. And finally, make sure you join the Second and Short subreddit. It is r/2ndand short. If you've never watched this show before, the way that we go, we start by talking about the biggest headlines in college football. Then we go through my top 10 in the nation. Following that is the top matchups of the week. Then a couple of matchups that are ones to watch. And we finish it off with my week 6 picks for college football. Last week we were 2-1. We're back into the positives, so make sure you stick around for those. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the headliners. The first headline we're talking about is the updated Heisman odds. Obviously, these get updated every week, but this was the biggest shift we saw. One of the bigger weeks in the college football season happened in week 5. So it goes as follows. Currently, Jalen Milroe sits as the favorite at plus 200. He is followed by Cam Ward at plus 500. Then is two-way superstar Travis Hunter at plus 600. Then rounding out the top 4 is Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty at plus 1,000. Milroe obviously jumping up significantly after the huge performance he had, getting the win over Georgia in week 5. Cam Ward still kind of rolling off of what we've seen, but a little bit slowed down after what happened last week with Virginia Tech. Travis Hunter having another big game on both sides of the ball for Colorado, and Ashton Jeanty following up multiple great performances with yet another, probably one of his best of the season in week 5. If we're talking about Heisman from a quarterback angle, I think right now it goes to Jalen Milroe. But if we're talking about the best player in college football, which the Heisman is supposed to be, then I would probably go with Travis Hunter at this moment in time. The next big thing is something we just cannot avoid here on the College Football Show, and it's more Pac-12 news, also a little bit of Mountain West news as well. This one not as much football related, but still Pac-12 related. The Pac-12 will be adding Gonzaga, and they will bring along all of their sports teams as well. Obviously, that one a huge shift for the college basketball world. Pac-12 also talked with multiple other big schools from mid-major conferences out west, but Gonzaga was certainly the top target. And now that they've gotten Gonzaga, the focus definitely turns back to the football side because they still need one more FBS team. The other big conference realignment news we got was that UTSA will be leaving the Conference USA and joining the Mountain West. This move seems a little bit crazy to me. Obviously, the Conference USA is probably the worst, if not one of the worst conferences in the group of 5. The Mountain West certainly looking for new teams and trying to find new ways that they can bring in money. And with UTSA, who has been extremely good for a number of years now, to bring them into the Mountain West will be a huge addition for that conference, who's getting absolutely poached right now by the Pac-12. The other big piece of news that we got this week in this whole situation is that Sacramento State has been making the effort to make the jump out of the FCS into an FBS program, either Pac-12 or more likely the Mountain West. They recently announced that they'll be building a 25,000-seat stadium. Off the back of that announcement, a Pac-12 committee for Sacramento State has gone out and gotten $35 million in NIL funding from local businesses as well as important leaders in the area. Their goal is $50 million, which they're well on pace to do because these $35 million were only accumulated in a matter of days. They believe that this will prove to the leaders that make the decision on whether they move up to the FBS that Sacramento State and the surrounding community can support and be beneficial to the college football landscape. I don't exactly know what's going to happen here for Sacramento State, but I do love that they're taking the initiative and trying to make this jump without the special circumstances that some other teams have had. The next big thing that's come across is the Big Ten will be changing the way that they officiate onside kicks. I'm sure by now we've all seen the offsides penalty that ended the game for Minnesota against Michigan, down just 3 points in the fourth quarter. A Minnesota special teams player was called offsides on the onside kick, but most people say that it did not look like he was offsides, including those on the broadcast. And it makes it look even more clear that he wasn't offsides if the Big Ten comes out just 2 days later and decides that they're going to change the rules. Now, after this rule change, officiating crews from the Big Ten will now line up their line judge and head line judge on the restraining line on the onside kick. In the Big Ten statement, they said that this will put multiple officials in the best position to make the call. We have a little bit of QB news that has come out during the start of this week, and we'll start with my Florida State Seminoles. DJ Uiagalelei will miss this week's game against Clemson with a broken finger that he suffered against SMU. Brock Glenn will start in his spot for this coming week. DJ is likely to miss a couple more weeks as well with this broken finger. So as of now, Brock Glenn will be the starter. We will see if the redshirt freshman holds on to that spot with true freshman Luke Kromenhoek and redshirt sophomore Dylan McNamara as well on the roster. The other big QB news that we got is that Quinn Ewers should be able to return for Texas's matchup against Oklahoma in Week 7. This week, Texas is on a bye, so they'll have plenty more time for Quinn Ewers to get back to 100% before the Oklahoma matchup. Obviously, to some people, Arch Manning should hold the job. You're ridiculous. There is no QB battle to be had here. Arch Manning was simply doing his job as the backup quarterback, and he did a fantastic job, but he did not take the starting spot. As of right now, that's all the news that I've seen come across, so it is time that we talk about my top 10 heading into Week 6. Top 10 starts off pretty predictably. It's going to be Alabama at number 1 after the huge victory over Georgia. Then Texas drops down to 2. Ohio State holds down the number 3 spot in the nation. Right here is where I've got Georgia at number 4. I don't think they'll fall down past Tennessee. Tennessee stays at 5 for me. I think Georgia showed enough fight against the team that is now considered the number 1 team in the nation. We've yet to see Tennessee against a truly great opponent yet this season. I think Oklahoma's fine, but we've certainly seen they've had their struggles as well. So for now, Georgia will stay at 4. Tennessee will stay at 5. Now with the loss that Ole Miss took, they definitely dropped down the line. So Oregon comes in at 6. They are followed by Missouri, who jumps back into their spot that they had earlier. I know it's been a little bit questionable. They were on a bye this week, but they've got an important matchup this week that'll really tell us where they should be at after it. Then at number 8, we've got Miami coming off the back of a very close victory over Virginia Tech that arguably they should have lost. That last play was quite an interesting call that certainly should have been called incomplete. Then at number 9, I have Ole Miss dropping to this spot. I don't have them dropping quite as far as some, but I have Ole Miss here at number 9, right ahead of number 10, Penn State. Next couple teams right outside, you've got USC after a big win over Wisconsin. Michigan coming off of the back of a super close victory, which we already talked about with Minnesota. Then I have Notre Dame after their win over Louisville. And then I have LSU actually sneaking back up here after quite a fall off from the start of the season. And that's going to do it for my top 10. Let's go ahead and talk about the top matchups of the week. We'll start with number 9, Mizzou, heading on the road to number 25, Texas A&M. This is the spot for Mizzou to really do something. They are running out of time to prove it to everybody that they deserve to be up at the top. This game is kind of the first step in them proving to the nation that they deserve to be here. It's a ranked matchup. You're on the road in one of the most hostile environments in college football. If you can come out, get an impressive win here, then some people might start taking you seriously again after that 2-game skid that you just came off of. And Mizzou's got a really easy schedule overall in the grand scheme of the SEC. They're really only big opponents are Texas A&M this week. A couple of weeks they've got Alabama and then Oklahoma. If they can get the big win here at Kyle Field, they keep it close with Bama, and they beat Oklahoma, they're 100% in the college football playoff. But A&M is still not a pushover in this situation. I think I, as well as some other people, tend to underrate this A&M team, especially this season, because they're not really running away with games, but they're still winning. Yes, they lost that opening game to Notre Dame in very close fashion, but the other games they played, yes, they have not been big victories, but they do find ways to win. And that's what you need when you go up against the top 10 team in the nation. This is a really talented team with a good coach. They just need to go out and show it on a big stage, and this is their biggest stage to this point. Now, A&M doesn't necessarily specialize in anything on defense, and Missouri does spread the love pretty well between the run and the pass. On the flip side, Missouri doesn't necessarily defend the run all that well, but when it comes to touchdowns, they do tend to stop the rush very well. The Aggies offense does like to spread the love in the red zone, so this is a matchup I'm just looking forward to because of the way that these teams on offense and defense look against each other on the field. I'm very interested to see what both teams have to offer, so certainly a game to be watching. I'm personally going to take Mizzou. Very close game, though. I think we're going to see something like Mizzou 27, Texas A&M 20. Now on to our next matchup. SMU heads on the road to number 22 Louisville. Now I know on the surface this week doesn't look all that good, and this is obviously kind of the start of that. We only have one ranked versus ranked matchup this week, and it's the prior mentioned Missouri versus Texas A&M game. But SMU Louisville certainly has a claim for one of the top matchups of the week. Louisville is looking for a bounce back after the loss to Notre Dame last week. The defense didn't necessarily look very good, and they've got to step it up here and play an SMU team that is looking pretty hungry since their one loss this season. SMU really just wants respect. Their one loss was to BYU. It was a really close game. They held a team that's looked fantastic up to this point in the season to only 18 points. The offense just wasn't quite rolling yet. And for SMU, right now, number 22 Louisville looks like the toughest opponent that they're going to face all season. So go ahead and get a victory. This is a big spot for SMU in their potentially very big run to the ACC championship game if they knock off Louisville right here. And this is a big spot for Louisville to try and bounce back from what happened at Notre Dame, figure out what happened on defense, and let this offense continue rolling. I think I'm personally going to take SMU in a bit of an upset. I really like SMU. I like what I've seen from them. I'm probably not going to put this one as a pick, but I do like SMU to win this game. Next matchup we've got is number 10, Michigan, heading on the road to play Washington. This one's just a bit of an interesting Big Ten matchup. We saw Michigan last week look pretty good until that fourth quarter, and the wheels just fell off, especially on the defensive side, letting Minnesota creep back in that game. Then they steal a victory on a bad call, and all of a sudden, Michigan is getting all this respect for only losing to Texas this far. For Washington, they're just yet to impress me since Jedd Fisch has arrived on campus. But this matchup does look pretty good for them. I know Michigan can't really pass the ball, so they do run the ball a lot. Washington, not necessarily the best run defense, but I think for Washington, the offensive matchups that they have really bode well for them. And it's because Michigan's been allowing a lot of points, and they don't defend the pass very well, despite having one of, if not the best cornerbacks in college football. And the fact that they're not defending the pass well, and you have Will Rogers at quarterback, a former air raid offense participant, I just think this doesn't bode well for Michigan's defense whatsoever. I see this as a pretty high-scoring affair, and it could end up going Washington's way. This line has continued to shift day after day in Washington's favor, and I'm starting to like him as well. So I'm going to take Washington in this matchup over Michigan. And my final game of the top matchups maybe doesn't exactly seem like a top matchup, but Rutgers is heading on the road to Nebraska, and this is a big spot for both of them. It's a big prove-it game, especially for Rutgers, who right now are 4-0. This is the exact kind of team that Rutgers needs to go out and just take care of business against. If they go out and they beat Nebraska by, let's say, a touchdown in this game, I think it totally changes the public opinion on Rutgers this season. I'm still looking for Raiola to really impress me and regain the attention that he got from the start of the season. But he's going up against a passing defense of Rutgers that has been really good, only allowing 179 passing yards per game. And with Raiola at quarterback, Nebraska's been averaging 260 yards per game. So we'll have to see how that matchup looks like in the air. For the offensive side for Rutgers, they definitely love to rush the ball. They've been one of the best rushing offenses in college football, averaging 273 yards on the ground per game. And they've scored 11 touchdowns, but they go up against a Nebraska defense that has been elite against the run. They're allowing just 95.4 rushing yards per game and are yet to allow a rushing touchdown. So I don't know who's going to win this game personally. I think both these teams are relatively evenly matched, but I think I'm going to go with Rutgers just because I love their ability to run the ball and it makes them extremely fun to watch. So this is definitely one just to watch, but I do like Rutgers personally. Now we head from the top matchups over to the ones to watch. And this week, like I said, it's not the best slate we've had, but I think this week for ones to watch, it's really about entertainment value. What can we get out of some of these matchups that maybe don't look as good on paper? So I'll start with one that you probably would write off, but Iowa versus number 3 Ohio State looks like fun to me. I just love watching some good old Iowa football. This game will probably end 35-6 Ohio State, and nobody's really going to think it was that good unless they watched it. Like, Iowa is just going to spend every single drive going from like their 20 or 25 yard line up to probably the 50 yard line and punting. probably like 7 times. But every single time they start running down the field like that, they get those, 30 yards, we're going to start thinking, is this the one where they could kick a field goal? Is this the one where maybe they could break off a play for a touchdown? You're just going to have to watch. I don't know. And I'm sure Ohio State, there's obviously things to watch as well. Their offense is full of superstars, but I think this one will actually just be fun to watch because I think Iowa is kind of fun to watch. The next game I've got is Boston College versus Virginia. This one also just does not necessarily jump off the page, but these are two teams that are pretty good at stepping up and playing good opponents very well. Like, the best way to describe these two teams is they're very much capable of beating a better team. The problem is, in this matchup, who is the better team? As of right now, Virginia's a 1-point favorite at home, so you don't really know who Vegas thinks is the better team. It just feels so evenly matched, and that's why I think it just bodes well for entertainment value. We've got a total set at about 53.5 right now. So if we're looking at a game that's going to end up being, let's say, 28-27, I'm going to be tuning in because that sounds like a fun game to watch. Next game I've got for you is Syracuse going on the road to number 25 UNLV. First of all, Friday night game. Last week's Friday night game was fantastic. We've actually got 2 of them this week. We've got on Fox, Oregon and Michigan State. On FS1, you've got this game, Syracuse and UNLV. I think this is the better game to watch by far. Kyle McCord is not as bad as some would have said after last season. He's been okay for Syracuse. And for UNLV, the fact that they are now without Matthew Sluka and they still won last week, now they're ranked in the top 25. They're just a story to follow and a team to watch on the field that has been really, really good this season. So if you got nothing going on at 9 p.m. on Friday, this is definitely a game to be watching. My final one to watch this week is Texas Tech going on the road to Arizona. Texas Tech has kind of become my scapegoat for a good game to watch just because I love offense. This team just puts up points week after week. They've had, I think, 1 game with a total over 100, 3 games with totals in the 80s or more. They just put up points in every single game, and Arizona's the kind of team that wants to put up points as well. So if you're looking for a high-scoring matchup, I think it's this one to watch as well. Watch out for Tetero McMillan to potentially have a big one this week. All right, that's all for the ones to watch this week. Let's get in to the Week 6 picks. If you haven't been following along with the picks every week, in Week 3 I went 2-1. Week 4 I went 1-2, and now last week I went 2-1. So we're back in the positives. We're 5-4 up to this point, but I don't think the pattern will continue. We're going for 3-0 this week, and I'm feeling real good about it. I'd like to remind everybody before we get into this is not gambling advice, nor will I be making these picks myself with any money. I live in Georgia, which is a non-gambling state, so I will not be putting any wagers on these plays. Without further ado, the first pick of the week, I like Iowa State minus 11.5 against Baylor. Baylor is going to Ames, Iowa for this game after failing to cover in their last 2 games. Last week, they were the favorite and lost outright, so I'm super low on Baylor. I've always been that way. If you listened last week, I got to ramble on and on about how much I don't believe in Dave Aranda. I still don't this week, but I do believe in Matt Campbell. Iowa State's covered in their last 3 games. And last week's victory made Matt Campbell the winningest head coach in Iowa State history. So the Cyclones come into this game riding off the high. They've covered 3 in a row. Now they go into this game, and it's October. The calendar has changed, and we know that the calendar is so important for teams. Some teams play better in some months, and Iowa State, and specifically Coach Matt Campbell, is that guy. In the last 20 years, Matt Campbell is the 3rd best coach against the spread in the month of October. Campbell's 29-14-1 against the spread when head coaching games in October. And with this game in the first weekend of October, I don't see it any other way. Baylor lost to a BYU team last week by 8 that I don't think has as good of a defense as Iowa State, and I think Iowa State's offense is pretty well on par with what BYU's capable of. I see Iowa State holding Baylor pretty low scoring and just running away with it, probably by 2 touchdowns, thus covering that 11.5 points. So we are throwing Iowa State minus 11.5 on the bet slip. My next pick, I've got Ole Miss minus 9 in a big bounce-back game against South Carolina. They head on the road to Columbia, coming off of the loss to Kentucky last week. And I know you might be thinking, well, Kentucky got steamrolled by South Carolina, and they just beat Ole Miss. Well, it's not that easy. It's not how these things go, because bounce backs are real, especially for the top teams. In this situation, it lends Ole Miss to win outright and potentially cover, and I think they've got a great chance to do it. When favored by 7 or more points after a straight-up loss, Lane Kiffin teams are 4-0 against the spread. Since 2019, as a road favorite, Lane Kiffin teams are 13-1 straight up and 10-3-1 against the spread. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss because I think the trends work well for them here. Give me Ole Miss -9. Now, this final one may be the most questionable, and it's only because I don't typically like going with a heavily favored team that kind of goes off the back of not a uber-talented roster. That's the exact spot I'm putting myself here with Boise State, but I think they're capable of it. Boise State is a 27-point favorite against Utah State. But in recent history, Boise State has absolutely dominated this matchup. Since 1998 against Utah State, Boise State is 19-1. Boise State is 20-1 straight up and 17-3-1 against the spread. And Boise State has won and covered in 7 straight matchups with Utah State. The Broncos have also won 11 consecutive home games against Utah State. And it only helps Boise State that the Aggies are especially bad this season. Their only win as of right now was a blowout victory over Robert Morris in week 1. This Utah State team has a horrible schedule as well. After that Robert Morris win, they had to play USC and then Utah back-to-back. Then they had to travel across the country and play Temple. And then now they come back across and have to play at Boise State. And then next week, they go on the road to UNLV. So Utah State is beat up, and they're going to continue to get beat up. And meanwhile, I haven't even mentioned the fact that Ashton Jeanty is not a human being. This guy's unbelievable. I could expect him to score the 28 points that make this difference. So I'm taking Boise State -27 because Utah State sucks and Ashton Jeanty is maybe going to win the Heisman. Certainly has a seat in New York. All right, guys, that was the picks for week 6. Thank you for watching. Make sure before you leave us a like, you subscribe, and you turn on post notifications. Give us in the comments your Heisman winner as of right now. Who is winning the Heisman? Of course, make sure you follow us on Instagram. Stay up to date with everything we're doing. Make sure you listen to the podcast Mondays and Fridays here on YouTube, as well as anywhere that you get your podcasts. And join that Second and Short subreddit, r/2ND short. We'll be back right here next week for college football week 7. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.